Welcome to YVR's DevVlog number 1.
We are in our test level, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the environment as well as movement systems and interaction systems. So these lovely hands that we have here. So as you can see around me, we are in a very, very simple environment. And this is our test level that we use to test out new systems. And the reason why we keep it so simple is so that when something goes wrong with the system that we're testing, we know that it has something to do with that system, that it's not something to do with the other 50 systems that might be interacting with it, that there's an AI system driving a flock of birds in the sky while we happen to be teleporting, and that has crashed the whole thing. So we keep it simple, and that way we can pinpoint in on when things go wrong a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. So you probably only are going to see a couple of videos in here, and then we're going to move into the actual game world. To talk about movement, as that kind of is the foundation upon which everything is built, we can look at what we have in front of us here, and you can see that there's 3 different slopes. So this is the first movement restricting system that I want to talk about. There's going to be a few of them, and we'll start with slopes. What we want to do is prevent essentially players from being able to move onto surfaces that are above a certain degree. So right now, I think we have 25, 35, and 45 here. And we can see that we can teleport onto all of them just fine. But if we started moving up to 60 or 65, that's when we would see this nice blue circle turn into a red circle to prohibit that. So it's going to allow us to do things like having players develop maybe a rock climbing skill or something that we can limit their slope angle based on certain attributes or characteristics that they have. And we'll move on to the next restrictor. And I don't think this is working right now, but this used to be a restricted material. So we also are going to have materials in the engine, such as lava or fast-flowing rivers that are going to prevent you from teleporting onto. And I mean, if you want to commit suicide, there's going to be ways that you can do it, but at least this way we can prevent people from accidentally doing it. The other way that we're restricting movement is by a pathfinding system. So even though I'm hopping around this world, there are pathfinding checks going on to see if I can walk, if there is a path from where I am now to where I want to go. And if there is, great, I can teleport. But if there isn't, for example, there's a giant chasm in the way, then even though this is within range of teleporting, as you can see by this little guy here, I still can't get over there because there's no path. And unfortunately, our drawbridge is broken, but if I could lower this, it would create a path, and then my next teleport attempt would quickly path across and say, okay, you can walk there, and then would allow me to easily walk to the other side. Let's see what else we have going on here. Oh, we can kind of give you a little sneak peek of that. We have distance as well. So part of being immersed in a VR experience, I find, is trying to recreate as much of what we would expect to happen in the real world. And one of the biggest breaks to that immersion is when you can just teleport around the world like you're a genie fresh out of the bottle. So we looked at that and we said, what can we do to make it feel a little bit more organic, make it feel a little bit more lifelike, but also not make people sick to their stomachs? Because the reason that almost every VR experience involves teleportation is because it is the best way to move around without getting sick to your stomach. So we started from the question of how can we naturally move without getting sick? And we started looking at academic studies at US universities and found a method of reducing the field of view based on movement speed and distance traveled. And so you'll see here that after 10 meters, our little icon goes from a teleport to a walk. And that's just saying that you are now in walk mode, and anything beyond that is back to teleport. So this is just for testing purposes, but we can see what it looks like when I move there, and it becomes more of just like a nice glide. And as I do this, the longer I do this, you should start noticing the edges of my vision getting darker and darker and darker. On a 2D monitor, that's probably looking pretty extreme, but on a headset with spherical lenses, it's far, far less noticeable. And it actually plays on a pretty interesting trick that the brain does when you're running or when you're walking. And you can try this by just getting up and running in a straight line, and you'll notice that your eyes will immediately fixate on what's in front of you and will stop paying as much attention to your peripheral vision. So as I do this in your, the edges of my vision do get darker, but because of what my brain is naturally doing, I don't really notice it. So again, it's pretty noticeable on the 2D screen, but it's hardly noticeable in the headset. The big thing that's noticeable, though, in the headset is that it reduces nausea like you wouldn't believe. So we've seen upwards of 30 or 40% reduction in the noticing of motion sickness. And the other cool thing is that the motion sickness that you might get, a much lesser intensity version of it because of this FOV reduction, goes away much, much faster. So before, when I would play a pretty intense game that involved a lot of movement, I would get queasy, and you'd play and you get queasy, and then you'd take off the headset and you would stay queasy for half an hour or an hour, at least as a new player. But with this, essentially, as soon as my FOV goes back to normal, by the time that happens, the queasiness in my stomach, as small as it is basically completely gone. A proper path to get from point A to point B, and if I can't, then, well, I can't get there. However, there's going to be plenty of ways that you can manipulate the environment to create a path, leaning a ladder up against the side of a wall, or knocking down a tree and having it fall over a river, whatever else you want to do. We're also going to be limited by distance, so you can't just point to the other side of the map and teleport all the way over there. Probably at the very least, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go for a little bit of a stroll. And oh, that's one more thing that we can talk about. The other thing that's going to restrict movement is height. So we can see that we have a nice small area underneath this ramp, and I have no ability to teleport. We have a slightly larger space under this ramp, and I have no ability to teleport. But under this ramp here, we can see as soon as I have clearance, just barely, now I can teleport under here. And so I'm 6'4", 6'5", and so this is just enough clearance for me. And let's see if we have that in there. Yep. So I have just enough to get under there. Now, if I go here, here's an interesting thing: is you can see as far as I guess the last method of restricting movement is going to be based on running into physical walls. And what we want to do is we want to prevent players from being able to peek their head inside of somebody's house, see if there's anything in there worth taking, and then they break in. So we can clip our hands through for now. We might be restricting that later on, but we cannot walk through. So as I physically take 2 steps forward, 1, 2, you can see that I haven't gotten any closer to that wall or that little ramp there. And so that's something else we're working on right now, is just what we want to restrict movement through and what we don't. So there's going to be certain things like maybe small tables that we don't want to piss people off and make it, they have to actually walk around it, but you can take a step through and lean forward and grab things. Whereas other things like large walls, we definitely want to make it so you can't just stick your head through the wall. And you can see it probably doesn't translate too well, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple steps back physically, teleport forward, and now I've got about 5 or 6 feet of clearance in front of me. And I'm just going to keep on walking forward. And as I do, you can see that this wall is not getting any closer. Actually, for me, it feels like the wall is being pushed away, but probably for you, it just looks like I'm not moving at all. But I actually took 5 steps forward there, and I can't get through the wall. So all of these fun things are just considerations that you have to keep in mind when building an open world in VR that normally in other games would kind of just be something that you'd take for granted. Anyways, that's a quick intro into the movement system, the ways that we're going to be restricting player movement based on what you'd expect in the real world. Now we've got these lovely hands in front of us. So YVR being a medieval game, we have peasants' hands, and looks like I'm a light-skinned European guy today. We'll see who I am tomorrow. And we're going to get some nice cloth physics going on in there eventually, but they're pretty static. Our end goal is to have a full body simulated. So you can look down, you can see your feet, you can see a full shadow, but it's a little bit challenging in VR just because we only have 3 sensors that are detecting movement. So we have our headset and we have our 2 controllers. Now, when you're wanting to simulate the movement of an entire body, you kind of need to know where the torso is. For example, I'm turning my head to the left right now. My torso is facing forward and my hands are facing forward. But when I go like this, is my torso facing to the left, or is it facing forward and I've just rotated my hands over? So you've got a lot of information that is going on that the lighthouses can't detect, and we're just working through ways of best guessing these things. Leg movements, for example, there's just no way to tell where my feet are right now, but if I'm walking forward, I'm going to be simulating a little bit of a walk step. So that's what's going on. For now, this is just the easiest kind of bug-free solution that we can have. We just took some arms, cut them off at the elbow, put a cool little materializing effect on there, and don't worry about any of the rigging or any of the wrist movements or anything like that. But yeah, that's about it. That's about it for the first devlog. Not too visually interesting, but a lot of foundation is being laid. And if you have any questions or comments about the movement system, about full body stuff, by all means, leave them in the comment section. Head over to Facebook, facebook.com/YourVR. Hit us up on Twitter at @your_VR, or head over to the website, playyour.com. Give us your feedback, and we might be implementing them in the next update. So hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time.